This is the VOA Special English Education Report. Bess Lomax Hawes was an American folk musician, singer, and teacher who died in November at the age of 88. She came from a family of music historians. She helped her father and brother, John and Alan Lomax, collect folk music. John Lomax developed an archive of American folk song at the Library of Congress. In the 1940s, after college, Bess Lomax joined the Almanac Singers, a group that sang social protest songs. Other members included Woody Guthrie, Pete Seeger, and Butch Hawes, who became her husband. The family later moved to California, where Bess taught music, including guitar and banjo. She also became an anthropology professor at what is now California State University, Northridge. In the 1970s, she worked at the Smithsonian Institution in Washington. Later, she directed the Folk Arts program at the National Endowment for the Arts. She received the National Medal of Arts from President Bill Clinton in 1993. Daniel Sheehy is acting head of the Center for Folklife and Cultural Heritage at the Smithsonian. He worked with Bess Lomax Hawes and remembers how she worked to keep folk traditions from being lost. He said she found ways to help those voices, songs, stories, and craft traditions make it into the lives of a much broader public. Bess Lomax Hawes may be best remembered for a song from 1949. She and Jacqueline Steiner took old music and wrote new words for a campaign song. The song was to support Walter O'Brien, a Progressive Party candidate for mayor of Boston, Massachusetts. One of Mr. O'Brien's promises was to fight a fare increase on the transit system then known as the MTA. The song is about Charlie, a man who does not have enough money to leave the train, so he has to ride forever. Here is part of this funny song. Did he ever return? No, he never returned, and his fate is still unlearned. He may ride forever 'neath the streets of Boston. He's the man who never returned. The candidate lost, but the MTA song later became a huge hit with a version by the Kingston Trio. And that's the VOA Special English Education Report. You can find transcripts, podcasts, and archives of our programs, and links to our social media at voaspecialenglish.com.
This is the VOA Special English Education Report. An American nonprofit organization helps young people around the world to understand important issues and each other. The Global Nomads Group organizes educational video conferences. Students and speakers discuss subjects like AIDS, world religions, nuclear weapons, immigration, climate change, and politics. For example, students from at least 8 schools in Ghana talked with American students about the election and inauguration of President Obama. The Ghanaians took part from a distance learning center in Accra. Live coverage from Washington brought the energy from the streets to the classrooms, said a story in Modern Ghana News. The Global Nomads Group, or GNG, was started in 1998 by 4 university students. They wanted other young people to become more informed about the world. Programs have been held in more than 40 countries. The group says at least 10,000 students take part each year. Shirley Heron teaches high school in Magnolia, Texas. She says her school is not using the programs this year because of budget cuts. But she tells us in an email, a live conference feed was 100% better than a textbook. Magnolia is a small town, and for many of my students, this was an opportunity to travel around the world. One thing her students discovered is that they liked the same music and activities as many other young people around the world. The Global Nomads Group charges for programs, but says it tries to help schools with limited resources. In one program, students in Rwanda and at several American high schools asked each other questions. These included questions from Rwandan students about subjects like drug use, HIV/AIDS, and girls in school who get pregnant. An American boy asked about ethnic groups in Rwanda. He asked about the differences between the Tutsi and the Hutu. A girl in Rwanda answered, "There is no difference between the Hutus and the Tutsis. First of all, they are not 2 different tribes. We are one people. They are just ethnicities." At the end of the video conference, the Rwandan teacher made an announcement. She said, "In our culture, we never say goodbye, and we are going to entertain you. Thank you." And that's the VOA Special English Education Report. This is the VOA Special English Education Report. Last week's report on bullying brought so many comments online, we are going to take this time to share some. One person who gave no name or country described an experience with a parent-teacher association. "I have been a victim of bullying in a PTA group. It is not just a problem for teenagers. Adults also engage in bullying activities, but it is usually verbal abuse by spreading lies to ruin your reputation or isolate the victim from the rest of the group. Since we are the role model of the next generation, our behavior will shape the future society." Vicky in Taiwan still remembers being scared by bullies in junior high school. And Jung Kim wrote, "Even we Koreans are made fun of by our own. If you're not cool with the popular people, you will be laughed at." Jeannie from Brazil says children should be taught to respect differences. And Kelly in the United States suggested that parents should spend more time with their children. If they are taught to be considerate when they are very young, they will not treat other people in a mean way. Joruji in Japan called for improving communication among students, parents, and teachers. Farshad, an Iranian in the United States, and Selim from France both suggested using psychologists in school to help control the problem. Some people complain that bullying is not always taken seriously. A commenter in Vietnam wrote, "We as parents and teachers should let children understand that they will be punished if they do wrong, and the punishments won't be only reminders or warnings." But not everyone agreed. Denisenko in Ukraine says what we call bullying is part of the socialization process. Children need to know how to defend oneself, how to establish relationships in a group. If laws or teachers or police will protect a child against bullying, he or she will never become an independent person. And several of you expressed sadness at the case of 15-year-old Phoebe Prince. Bullying may have led to her suicide. Monim Al-Hassi from Libya wrote, "I'm really astonished how such a beautiful, nice girl can do such a thing. She made a mistake when she listened to those who criticized her. They were jealous of her. God bless you, Phoebe Prince." You can find last week's report at voaspecialenglish.com. And that's the VOA Special English Education Report.
This is the VOA Special English Education Report. HALT International Business School has campuses in Boston, San Francisco, London, Dubai, and Shanghai. The HALT Global Case Challenge is a competition based on the idea that solving world problems requires a good business plan. Teams compete for prizes of $1 million to help an organization with efforts to solve problems like hunger, poverty, and disease. A HALT student, Ahmad Ashkar, created the challenge for teams from business schools around the world. This year's challenge deals with poverty. Teams will compete to develop business plans for 3 non-governmental organizations. Solar Aid works on energy projects in East and Southern Africa. Habitat for Humanity builds low-cost housing. And 1 laptop per child builds computers for governments in developing countries to supply to poor communities. That group is taking part in the competition for the 2nd time. David Batley from Solar Aid says his group works with local entrepreneurs to bring power from the sun to rural communities. I think the winning team will be one that uses a combination of really innovative thinking and taking account of the practicalities of operating in Africa and the challenges that represents. Sandy Parakilas took part in the first competition in 2009. The challenge that year was to help an organization reach 100 million people in 5 years. One of the 3 top prizes went to his team from Carnegie Mellon University for their business plan for 1 laptop per child. They were struggling with competition from Microsoft and Intel, and they were having trouble basically making money. So it was a great opportunity for some business students to come in and create some ideas for a not-for-profit to be more profitable, essentially. Howard McNally is Chief Executive Officer of the HALT Global Challenge. He says it's the equivalent of about 20,000 hours of consulting advice from the world's smartest, youngest people. Mr. McNally says the students learn about world problems and the opportunities that might be available for them in the market. And it's also a tremendous opportunity for the NGOs that we're working with to get the kind of advice that they're going to get about their vision and their goals. The 5 HALT campuses will hold regional competitions in February. Finalists will be chosen in New York in April. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Education Report. President Obama talked a lot about education in his State of the Union speech in January. He said, "We need to out-innovate, out-educate, and outbuild the rest of the world. If Americans want to win the future," he said, "then they also have to win the race to educate their children." The president said, over the next 10 years, nearly half of all new jobs will require education that goes beyond a high school education. And yet, as many as a quarter of our students aren't even finishing high school. The quality of our math and science education lags behind many other nations. America has fallen to 9th in the proportion of young people with a college degree. 2 years ago, Mr. Obama set a goal to regain the world's highest rate of college graduates by 2020. He says the responsibility to give every child a chance to succeed begins not in classrooms, but in homes and communities. He said, "Only parents can make sure the TV is turned off and homework gets done. We need to teach our kids that it's not just the winner of the Super Bowl who deserves to be celebrated, but the winner of the science fair." President Obama talked about his Race to the Top competition. It offered states money to develop plans to improve teacher quality and student performance. Also, he called for preparing 100,000 new teachers in science, technology, engineering, and math over the next 10 years. Mr. Obama offered to begin debate with Congress on immigration reform, and he linked that issue to education. He said, "Today, there are hundreds of thousands of students excelling in our schools who are not American citizens. Some are the children of undocumented workers. They grew up as Americans and pledge allegiance to our flag, and yet they live every day with the threat of deportation. Others come here from abroad to study in our colleges and universities. But as soon as they obtain advanced degrees, we send them back home to compete against us." The speech came the same day the Education Department released the latest results on student progress in science. The goal is for all students to perform at the proficient or advanced level. But only about 1/3 of students in grades 4 and 8 and 1/5 of 12th graders did that in 2009. Just 1 to 2% of students performed at the advanced level. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
This is the VOA Special English Education Report. Dyslexia is a problem that interferes with the ability to recognize words and connect sounds with letters when people read. People with this learning disorder may also have problems when they write. Dyslexia is not related to eyesight or intelligence. The problem involves areas of the brain that process language. Brain scientists are studying whether they can predict which young children may struggle with reading in order to provide early help. John Gabrielli at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology is leading a study of 5-year-olds in about 20 schools in the Boston area. He says, "We partner with schools that have kindergartens, and in this study, what we do is, for all the children whose parents permit them to participate, we give them a brief set of paper and pencil tests to look at which children appear to be at some risk for struggling to read." So far, 50 of the kindergartners have been examined in a machine that shows brain activity. The goal is to study 500 children using fMRI, or functional magnetic resonance imaging. The scanner uses a high-energy magnetic field and radio waves to look inside the body. Written tests are not always able to identify dyslexia or other problems. Professor Gabrielli says children can differ a lot in their abilities from day to day. He says brain scans may offer a more scientific way to identify problems. And with reading problems, he says, early identification is important. All the literature is that for intervention, behavioral programs, educational programs that help children overcome reading difficulties, the younger the child, the more effective they are. Reading problems are not usually identified until a child is in the 3rd or 4th grade. The longer the wait before children are recognized as poor readers, he says, the less these interventions can help. And, as Professor Gabrielli points out, poor reading can make education a struggle. Reading is everything. Even math and science have textbooks. During the brain imaging, the children are given tasks related to reading. They work with letters and sounds of language. The brain scans measure the extent to which certain parts of the brain become active while the children do the work. The neuroscientists say they are pleased with the early results, but still have a lot more work to do on the study. For VOA Special English, I'm Mario Ritter. For more education news, plus activities for learning English, go to voaspecialenglish.com.
This is the VOA Special English Education Report. Millions of high school students have read To Kill a Mockingbird. The novel by Harper Lee offers moral lessons about racial justice and respect. It tells the story of a young girl named Scout and her father, Atticus Finch, a lawyer. He defends a black man wrongfully accused of raping a white woman. In the end, an all-white jury sentences Tom Robinson to death. The book is set in the American South in the 1930s, but it was published 50 years ago on July 11th, 1960. It came out as the civil rights movement in the United States was gaining strength. Laws and customs in the South, however, still kept blacks and whites mostly separated. A mockingbird is a kind of gray songbird. The book gets its title from something Atticus Finch was told in his childhood when his father gave him a gun. Atticus Finch says his father told him it was a sin to kill a mockingbird because they don't hurt anyone, they just make music. Melinda Bird Murphy is head of the Alabama Center for Literary Arts. She says the moral of the story is be kind to one another, show human empathy and sympathy. Ms. Bird Murphy has read the book 4 times. She is a native of Harper Lee's hometown of Monroeville, Alabama. The author, who published only the 1 novel, is still alive, but rarely speaks publicly. Some people say To Kill a Mockingbird treats racism in a way that is simplistic, even offensive to blacks, and out of date in today's America. Still, it has been translated into more than 40 languages and has sold over 40 million copies. It won a Pulitzer Prize and is often required reading in high school. Gregory Peck won an Academy Award for playing Atticus Finch in the 1962 film version. The story takes place in a town that Harper Lee called Macomb, but she based the characters on real people she knew growing up. Since then, Monroeville has changed a lot. A number of African Americans serve in the local government. The courthouse, made famous by the book, is now a museum. A small shop and a fast food restaurant called Mel's Dairy Dream have replaced Harper Lee's childhood home. In Monroeville and around the country, fans of To Kill a Mockingbird are celebrating its 50th anniversary. Events include readings, discussions, and movie showings. And that's the VOA Special English Education Report.
This is the VOA Special English Education Report. Cranes are large birds with long legs and necks. In Japan and other East Asian cultures, they represent luck and long life. Japanese tradition says a person who folds 1,000 paper cranes gets the right to make a wish. Some school children in the United States have been folding cranes. They want to show they care about the victims of the March 11th earthquake and tsunami in Japan. Almost 40 Japanese American students attend Somerville Elementary School in Ridgewood, New Jersey. But all 525 students at the school have heard about the disasters. So they have decorated their school with paper origami cranes. Their wish is for a speedy recovery for the Japanese people. Art teacher Samantha Stankiewicz says the activity gave students a way to express empathy for victims. She says, for children, the folding of the cranes has been a really positive way for them to feel like they're actively engaged. One boy said, "The crane is a symbol of hope, so we try to have a lot of hope for those people in Japan." And a girl at the school said, "It makes me feel really happy that everyone's caring for another country." And that care was not just in the form of paper cranes. The school principal, Lorna Oates Santos, says children at Somerville Elementary raised about $2,000 for disaster relief agencies. The two agencies they chose were the American Red Cross and Save the Children. The school also has a television club that produces weekly programs on different subjects. Fourth grade teacher Gabrielle King is the director of the club and says the students were involved in the school's efforts. When the earthquake happened, she says, the children wanted to know what they could do to inform other students and raise awareness for the people in Japan. So they decided to do a show on the earthquake and to also make the origami cranes. Some American children have shown their feelings for the victims in Japan in other ways. Yasuhisa Kawamura is Japan's Deputy Consul General in New York. He says one young girl brought a painting she had made to the consulate. The painting showed the two countries, Japan and the United States, shaking hands over the ocean and saying, "We are with you." Mr. Kawamura said consulate staff members were very moved and touched by this young girl's expression. The East Asia program at Cornell University in the United States has a lesson plan and directions for folding origami cranes. You can find a link at voaspecialenglish.com. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Education Report. In November, the Institute of International Education in New York published its yearly report on international students in the United States. The report says more than 690,000 attended American colleges and universities during the last academic year. That number was a record high. It was an increase of 3% from the year before, but it was mainly the result of heavy growth from one country, China. China passed India as the top country sending students to the United States. The president of the institute, Alan Goodman, says the economic crisis could have limited growth from other countries. The Institute of International Education publishes its report called Open Doors with support from the State Department. The latest report is for the academic year that ended this past June. It says China sent more than 127,000 students. That was an increase of 30% over the previous year. India was the top sending country for 8 years, but last year it was in second place, followed by South Korea. Among the top sending countries, Japan showed the greatest decrease, a drop of 15%. For a 9th year, the University of Southern California in Los Angeles reported the largest number of foreign students, nearly 8,000. The most popular field of study for international students in the United States is business and management, followed by engineering. But the report noted a 9% decrease for intensive English language programs. Alan Goodman says the reason may have been the recession. He says English language training is often the most costly part for students beginning their studies. But Mr. Goodman pointed to an increase in another area. The number of foreign students at the undergraduate level. He says traditionally, study in America has been overwhelmingly at the graduate level. He says that has changed in the past several years. There has been almost an equal interest by families in sending students here for undergraduate education. He believes that is going to continue. There are 4,000 accredited colleges and universities. International students make up only about 3% of the total enrollment. What that means, he says, is that there is a lot of room for growth. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. This is the VOA Special English Education Report. Graduate schools in the United States are reporting a 9% increase in applications from international students this year. The increase is the same as 2 years ago. Last year's gain was 11%. China, Mexico, and Brazil showed the biggest increases in applications to enter master's and doctoral programs this fall. Engineering is the top area of study for international students and had the biggest increase in applications. Gains in business and physical and earth sciences were close behind. Life sciences showed no growth in the latest survey by the Council of Graduate Schools. The survey includes the top 5 countries that send graduate students to the United States, plus Mexico and Brazil. The top 5 are China, India, South Korea, Taiwan, and Canada. Applications from China climbed 18% this year. That was down from last year. India's number increased just 2%. Applications from South Korea and Taiwan decreased by 1 to 2%. Applications from Africa were down 5%, while the Middle East and Europe showed growth. Council President Deborah Stewart says final results will not be available until the summer. She pointed out that applications do not necessarily convert to enrollment. About 47% of all international applications to U.S. graduate schools come from students from China. But the share of the applicant pool that actually ends up enrolling in U.S. graduate programs is lower. Ms. Stewart says last fall, for example, 29% of all international graduate students were from China. This year is the 7th year of big increases in applications from China, where Ms. Stewart points out that more and more students are finishing college. There is tremendous growth in the undergraduate population in China. But she also notes that more people apply to graduate school during difficult economic times. So it certainly is possible, she says, that these very exceptionally strong numbers could be a reflection of recession experiences in China as well. George Ofosu from Ghana is working toward a doctorate in political science at the University of California, Los Angeles. He says he was attracted to UCLA's coursework, libraries, and other resources, including financial aid he would not have had at home. He says it was an ideal opportunity for him to, 1, get training, and 2, get some funding to pursue his studies. He calls his experience really phenomenal. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. For more stories about studying in the United States, go to voaspecialenglish.com. You can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter, find our podcasts on iTunes, and watch our captioned videos at the VOA Learning English channel on YouTube. This is the VOA Special English Education Report. A new college guide in the United States compares educational requirements in 7 subjects. These include math, science, writing, and United States history or government. The other subjects are economics, foreign language, and literature. The free online guide is from the American Council of Trustees and Alumni. The Council is a nonprofit group that supports liberal arts education. Its president, Ann Neal, says these areas of knowledge are needed to succeed in a 21st century society and an increasingly connected world. Yet she told VOA's Faiza El-Masri it was surprising how many students can graduate with, in her words, a thin education. 42 of the 100 colleges and universities surveyed received the lowest marks. This meant they required 2 or fewer of the 7 subjects. 5 schools received a top grade for requiring 6 subjects. These were Brooklyn College in New York City, Texas A&M, the University of Texas Austin, West Point, and the University of Arkansas. Robert Costrell is Professor of Education Reform and Economics at the University of Arkansas. He says many, if not all, of the top American colleges once had a core curriculum, a set of courses required for all students. But over the years, many have dropped these requirements, or they have watered them down, Professor Costrell says, into what became known as distribution requirements. This system lets a student choose from a number of different courses to satisfy a requirement. Professor Costrell says schools should not only re-examine what they teach, they should also measure what students have learned. For example, through some form of examinations or papers. A report in October from the College Board showed that college prices continue to rise. But Ann Neal from the American Council of Trustees and Alumni says higher prices do not guarantee a better general education. In fact, the group found that the higher the tuition, the more likely that students have to develop their own general education. The college guide is on the web at whatwilltheylearn.com. Ann Neal says her group is surveying more colleges. The hope, she says, is to discover what college graduates have really learned and how ready they are to compete in the global marketplace. And that's the VOA Special English Education Report.
This is the VOA Special English Education Report. Imagine that you have lost your job. You could start a sewing business at home if you had a better sewing machine and a little money to advertise, but you cannot get a loan from a bank. In recent times, many people in similar situations have received loans from student microfinance groups. Such groups make small loans for business or personal use. 12 of the organizations are part of a national network called the Campus Microfinance Alliance. The Alliance provides financial aid, technical advice, and training programs for its member groups. Each group has between 10 and 70 volunteers. many of them college students. They have enabled hundreds of people across the United States to launch small businesses. Vanessa Carter is director of the Alliance. She says bad economic times have sped the growth of the college microfinance movement. This really got started because students were walking off campus. It was the height of the economic recession, and they were seeing boarded up businesses and the effects of high unemployment firsthand. In Iowa, a student microfinance group at Grinnell College helps people both locally and internationally. The group started in 2007. At that time, Grinnell student Jeff Raderstrong and some friends raised more than $600 from other students. The Saturday night Grinnell tradition of missing a meal to help others enabled the group to make loans through the international microfinance organization Kiva.org. The Social Entrepreneurs of Grinnell, SEG, was launched. Later, SEG moved toward making loans directly to international partners. But as time passed, the group started helping people in Iowa. Jeff Raderstrong remembers how that developed. It sort of really quickly became clear that there was a lot that we could do in the community, in the Grinnell community. Because, you know, the town itself, there is some wealth, but there is a lot of poverty, and it is a lot of rural poverty. Mark Root Riley was another early member of SEG. He says the group recognized that small targeted loans at 0% or low interest could help local residents. SEG money has helped people make car payments so they can get to their jobs. It also helped patients in need of temporary housing near the medical center where they receive treatment. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Prasuti. Get more news and learn English at voaspecialenglish.com.
I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Education Report. Not everyone who teaches in a college or university is a professor. Many are instructors or lecturers. In fact, not even all professors are full professors. Many of them are assistant or associate professors or adjunct professors. So what do all of these different academic titles mean at American colleges and universities? Get ready for a short lecture, especially if you are thinking of a career in higher education. Professors usually need a doctoral degree, but sometimes a school will offer positions to people who have not yet received their doctorate. This person would be called an instructor until the degree has been completed. After that, the instructor could become an assistant professor. Assistant professors do not have tenure. Tenure means a permanent appointment. This goal of greater job security is harder to reach these days. Fewer teaching positions offer the chance for tenure. Teachers and researchers who are hired into positions that do offer it are said to be on the tenure track. Assistant professor is the first job on this path. Assistant professors generally have 5 to 7 years to gain tenure. During this time, other faculty members study the person's work. If tenure is denied, then the assistant professor usually has a year to find another job. Candidates for tenure may feel great pressure to get research published. Publish or perish is the traditional saying. An assistant professor who receives tenure becomes an associate professor. An associate professor may later be appointed a full professor. Assistant, associate, and full professors perform many duties. They teach classes, they advise students, and they carry out research. They also serve on committees and take part in other activities. Other faculty members are not expected to do all these jobs. They are not on a tenure track. Instead, they might be in adjunct or visiting positions. A visiting professor has a job at one school but works at another for a period of time. An adjunct professor is also a limited or part-time position to do research or teach classes. Adjunct professors have a doctorate degree. Another position is that of lecturer. Lecturers teach classes, but they may or may not have a doctorate. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. You can read and listen to our reports at voaspecialenglish.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter at VOA Learning English.
This is the VOA Special English Education Report. Not everyone who teaches in a college or university is a professor. Many are instructors or lecturers. In fact, not even all professors are full professors. Many of them are assistant or associate professors or adjunct professors. So what do all of these different academic titles mean at American colleges and universities? Get ready for a short lecture, especially if you are thinking of a career in higher education. Professors usually need a doctoral degree, but sometimes a school will offer positions to people who have not yet received their doctorate. This person would be called an instructor until the degree has been completed. After that, the instructor could become an assistant professor. Assistant professors do not have tenure. Tenure means a permanent appointment. This goal of greater job security is harder to reach these days. Fewer teaching positions offer the chance for tenure. Teachers and researchers who are hired into positions that do offer it are said to be on the tenure track. Assistant professor is the first job on this path. Assistant professors generally have 5 to 7 years to gain tenure. During this time, other faculty members study the person's work. If tenure is denied, then the assistant professor usually has a year to find another job. Candidates for tenure may feel great pressure to get research published. Publish or perish is the traditional saying. An assistant professor who receives tenure becomes an associate professor. An associate professor may later be appointed a full professor. Assistant, associate, and full professors perform many duties. They teach classes, they advise students, and they carry out research. They also serve on committees and take part in other activities. Other faculty members are not expected to do all these jobs. They are not on a tenure track. Instead, they might be in adjunct or visiting positions. A visiting professor has a job at one school but works at another for a period of time. An adjunct professor is also a limited or part-time position to do research or teach classes. Adjunct professors have a doctorate. Another position is that of lecturer. Lecturers teach classes, but they may or may not have a doctorate. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Presutti. You can learn English and stay informed every day from your computer or mobile device at voaspecialenglish.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and iTunes at VOA Learning English.
I'm Mario Ritter with the VOA Special English Education Report. Some American parents might think their children need better educations to compete with China and other countries. But how much do the parents themselves need to change? A new book called Battle Hymn of the Tiger Mother by Amy Chua has caused a debate about cultural differences in parenting. Ms. Chua is a professor at the Yale Law School in New Haven, Connecticut, and the mother of 2 daughters. She was raised in the American Midwest by immigrant Chinese parents. In the Chinese culture, the tiger represents strength and power. In her book, Ms. Chua writes about how she demanded excellence from her daughters. For example, she threatened to burn her daughters' stuffed animals unless she played a piece of music perfectly. She would insult her daughters if they failed to meet her expectations. Ms. Chua says she had a clear list of what her daughters, Sophia and Louisa, were not permitted to do. They could not attend a sleepover, have a play date, watch TV, or play computer games, be in a school play, or get any grade less than an A. Many people have criticized Amy Chua. Some say her parenting methods were abusive. She even admits that her husband, who is not Chinese, sometimes objected to her parenting style. But she says that was the way her parents raised her and her 3 sisters. Ms. Chua makes fun of her own extreme style of parenting. She says she eased some of the pressure after her younger daughter rebelled and shouted, "I hate my life, I hate you." Ms. Chua says she decided to retreat when it seemed like there was a risk that she might lose her daughter. But she also says American parents often have low expectations of their children's abilities. She says one of the biggest differences I see between Western and Chinese parents is that Chinese parents assume strength rather than fragility. Stacy DeBroff has written 4 books on parenting. She says the debate over Ms. Chua's book has to do with 2 questions. What does it mean to be a successful parent? And what does it mean to be a successful child? Ms. DeBroff says Amy Chua's parenting style is not limited to Chinese families. She says it represents a traditional way of parenting among immigrants seeking a better future for their children. But she also sees a risk. When children have no time to be social or to follow their own interests, they might not develop other skills that they need to succeed in life. Stacy DeBroff advises parents to develop their own style of parenting and not just repeat the way they were raised. And that's the VOA Special English Education Report. What are your thoughts about parenting styles and cultural differences? Tell us at voaspecialenglish.com or on Facebook at VOA Learning English. For VOA Special English, I'm Mario Ritter.
This is the VOA Special English Education Report. Conflicts around the world are keeping tens of millions of young people from going to school. Many have physical or emotional injuries that make it hard or even impossible for them to learn. Later this year, UNESCO will release its 2012 Education for All Global Monitoring Report. UNESCO is the United Nations educational, scientific, and cultural organization. The yearly publication is part of a global campaign to provide primary education to all children within the next 3 years. The report documents the situation in countries that have made the least progress toward the Millennium Development Goals. These goals require universal primary education and equality for boys and girls in schooling by 2015. Pauline Rose is the director of the report. She says at last count, in 35 conflict-affected countries, there were 28 million children out of school. In some countries, schools were not even accessible in conflict zones. There are no teachers, and the schools are sometimes attacked. The Geneva Conventions bar the targeting of public places like schools and hospitals. In some cases, schools are targeted because they represent the government. In other cases, schools are targeted for religious or political reasons. Pauline Rose points to Afghanistan, where militant groups have attacked girls' schools to keep girls from getting an education. In other parts of the world, schools are often caught in the crossfire of violence. Conflicts also put girls and boys at risk of sexual violence and of being forced into war. Under international law, refugees are the only displaced people with a guaranteed right to education. But that guarantee often means little. Last year, Pauline Rose visited camps in northern Kenya that shelter more than 250,000 refugees from Somalia. She says half the children have no access to school, and there are classes of over 300 children. The study asks, what if conflict states in sub-Saharan Africa moved just 10% of their military spending to education? UNESCO says they could educate more than 1/4 of their out-of-school population. And in Pakistan, it says 20% of the military budget could provide primary education for all children. Experts say one country has been a real success story. For years, Botswana has used its wealth from diamond exports to finance universal primary education and to create a skills base for its growing economy. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Presutti.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report. Lawmakers in Washington are debating education issues, including the interest rates that students pay for loans. College students who take loans graduate owing an average of $26,000. But some economists say the real issue is controlling the cost of college. Experts say these high costs are hurting the whole economy. For the past 30 years, college tuition has been increasing at twice the rate of inflation. Universities say decreasing financial support from state governments forces them to charge higher tuition. On average, private colleges now charge more than $30,000 a year. Terry Hartle is a spokesman for the American Council on Education, which represents thousands of colleges across the United States. He says funding for education has been shrinking for years. Experts worry that the high cost of education makes it less likely that good students from poor families can attend college. This means fewer scientists, engineers, and others who could help increase economic growth. Also, a survey shows that some students concerned about repaying thousands of dollars in loans are delaying marriage and children. Many cannot afford to invest in a house or buy a car. Georgetown University labor economist Anthony Carnevale says the current system cuts economic growth for the whole country, and the effects are important. He says meeting the demand for workers with higher education could add $500 billion to the American economy. A new government report says 1/3 of Americans aged 25 to 29 now hold college degrees, up from 1/4 in 1995. For VOA Learning English, I'm Mario Ritter.
This is the VOA Special English Education Report. Americans are considering national education standards recently developed by teachers and other education experts. The National Governors Association and the Council of Chief State School Officers led the effort. The United States, unlike other nations, has never had the same school standards across the country. The reason? Education is not discussed in the Constitution. That document limits the responsibilities of the federal government. Other responsibilities, like education, fall to the individual states. Local control of education probably was a good idea 200 years ago. People stayed in the same place, and schools knew what students needed to learn. But today, people move to different cities, and some people work at jobs that did not exist even 20 years ago. Many American educators say that getting a good education should not depend on where you live. They say that some states have lowered their standards in order to increase student scores on tests required by the No Child Left Behind Act. Kara Schlosser is Communications Director for the Council of Chief State School Officers. She says the new standards clearly state what a student should be able to do to be successful in college and work. The standards deal with language and mathematics in every grade, from kindergarten through high school. For example, in first grade, students should be asking and answering questions about something they read. In mathematics, students should be working with shapes in kindergarten and angles in fourth grade. 48 states have already shown approval for the standards. 2 states reject the idea. Critics say that working toward the same standards in every state will not guarantee excellence for all. Some educators in Massachusetts say adopting the proposal will hurt their students because the state standards are even higher. Others say the change will be too costly, requiring new textbooks and different kinds of training for teachers. Still others fear federal interference or control. Supporters say the standards are goals and do not tell states or teachers how to teach. They also say the federal government is not forcing acceptance. However, approving the standards will help states qualify for some federal grant money. And that's the VOA Special English Education Report.
This is the VOA Special English Education Report. Girls and boys usually attend classes together in American public schools. But there are some single-sex programs, like a girls' public school in Dallas, Texas. It opened in 2004. The students have done well enough that the school system is now opening a school for boys. Nakia Douglas is principal of the Barack Obama Male Leadership Academy. He says he was the kind of student that the school is seeking. I was born and raised in South Dallas by a single parent. I was a neighborhood child. I was that child that I would work if I knew the teacher believed in me. But at the same time, I had a hunger and desire for more. Educational researchers say boys learn in different ways and mature more slowly than girls and are more likely to leave school. Being in class with the opposite sex can also take attention away from learning. Kendall Keeter thinks the boys' school will be good for his son the way the girls' school was for his daughter. Our thought was to also give our son an opportunity that would best prepare him for college in the same manner she was prepared. And I can't imagine any other option that would have prepared her better. Another parent, Madeline Hayes, also likes the idea of a publicly funded school for boys. This is something, as cheesy as it sounds, that I've always dreamed about. That there will be a boys' school that doesn't charge $25,000 a year, but would give the same academics, the same level of interaction and leadership. The school is for grades 6 through 9. It will offer college preparatory classes and leadership courses even on weekends. Principal Douglas says the boys will be urged to support one another. All of our young men we call brother. So it may be Brother Malik Davis or Brother Samuel Keeter. The young men understand they are their brother's keeper. And so the young men are really learning to be responsible, not only for themselves, but also for their brothers here at the campus. Most students who want to be accepted into the Obama Academy in Dallas will need to have good grades and pass a number of tests. But 10 to 15% will not have to meet all of the entrance requirements. Principal Nakia Douglas says they will have to show they have a strong character and a desire to learn. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
This is the VOA Special English Education Report. Last week, we told you about a call for American educators to do more to protect students from sexual violence on campus. The government recently sent a letter telling schools, colleges, and universities that such violence is a form of sex discrimination. That means it violates a 1972 law against discrimination on the basis of sex in education programs and activities. The letter says schools must take steps like making sure victims know their rights and are kept informed about investigations. Victims must also be protected if the accused attacker is still in school with them. Ruslan Ali is Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights at the Department of Education. She and her staff wrote that letter. Our sense of urgency could not be greater, she says. I'm sure any parent in America would say they don't want their child to go to college or school and have to be worried about being raped. And we are going to work with officials to make sure that doesn't happen. One of those officials is Mary Mayhew. She leads efforts to prevent sexual harassment and rape at the University of New Hampshire. That was where Vice President Joe Biden and Education Secretary Arne Duncan released the guidance letter in April. Ms. Mayhew says she believes sexual violence on campuses has actually decreased over the past 20 years. She says schools are getting better at educating students to understand the idea of consent. Or, put more simply, that no means no. She says between 1988 and 2000 was when we really started implementing education campaigns about what consent is. And that did amount to some degree of prevention. Ms. Mayhew says the warning from the government to pay more attention to the problem might lead more schools to start or expand their programs. At the same time, however, it might also lead to an increase in reports of sexual assaults. Not necessarily because the problem has gotten worse, she says, but because more students will know their rights and be willing to report attacks on campus. Ruslan Ali at the Education Department says the government is ready to take action against schools that fail to protect their students. She says where there are violations, and in the case where officials are not willing to comply with the nation's civil rights laws, we will enforce the laws vigorously. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Presutti. If you want to read that 19-page letter, go to voaspecialenglish.com.
This is the VOA Special English Education Report. What is the best way to learn a new language? A small study of foreign language learning in adults compared two methods. One is known as the explicit or classroom method. This is the kind of traditional classroom teaching where students are taught a lot of information about grammar rules. The other method is known as the implicit or immersion method. The idea here is to learn much the way children do when they learn a native language. That is, by being with native speakers and absorbing the language that surrounds them, generally without a lot of explanation. Teachers may combine these two methods into what Professor Michael Ullman calls immersion-style classroom teaching. But is that necessarily a better way to learn a language? Mr. Ullman was the senior investigator for the new study. He is a professor of neuroscience at Georgetown University Medical Center in Washington. He says he was surprised to find that combining the two methods might not help the brain in processing the new language. If he had to learn a language, what would he do? One possibility would be to start with classroom and then go to immersion. But he says there is a possibility that classroom could hurt later immersion. That is one possibility in interpreting the data. The Public Library of Science published the study earlier this year. The 21 adults in the experiment learned Brocanto 2, a 13-word language created for the study. The words and grammar rules relate to a computer game similar to chess that the learners played. For example, Blom Nemo Lu Neep Li Praz means the square Blom piece switches with the Neep piece. The researchers tested the people 3 to 6 months after they had learned the language to see how well they could remember it. The study found that those who had learned it with the immersion method had brain waves similar to those of native speakers of a language when speaking that language. Professor Ullman says those who trained with the classroom method also became more native-like in their brain processing. But only the immersion group showed full native-like processing of the grammar. Still, he says teachers should not make any curriculum changes based on his findings. He says further research is needed, and it may be, for example, that a combination of classroom and immersion might be best, but we don't know that. For VOA Special English, I'm Mario Ritter.
I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Education Report. In Giles County, Virginia, the school board has removed displays of the 10 Commandments in its schools. The county thought that posting the 10 Commandments along with the first part of the United States Constitution might help increase moral values. There had been few complaints since the commandments were posted almost 12 years ago. But recently, civil liberties groups had threatened to take the county to court if it did not remove them. The United States Supreme Court permits the 10 Commandments to be on public property so long as the goal of displaying them is not to gain support for religion. But in 1980, the court ruled that the 10 Commandments cannot be shown in public schools because displaying them shows support of religion by the government. Jewish and Christian holy books say the 10 Commandments were laws given to the prophet Moses by God. Many Americans believe the country was founded on Judeo-Christian beliefs. Many of their beliefs are expressed in the 10 Commandments, They are a set of rules against murder, stealing, cheating, adultery, and profanity. Douglas Laycock is a professor of constitutional law at the University of Virginia School of Law in Charlottesville. He says the Supreme Court has ruled that governments must be neutral about religious teachings. He said, putting up the Ten Commandments in a way that promotes the Jewish and Christian scriptures is a violation of the Constitution, and especially if they do it in a public school. Officials in Giles County say they may put the Ten Commandments back on the walls of the schools, but will add other historical documents. Professor Laycock says it is possible that might satisfy a court. Since the Supreme Court ruling in 1980, more conservative justices have been appointed to the court. Professor Laycock says some conservative activists believe this new, more conservative court might be willing to once again permit the Ten Commandments to be displayed in public schools. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. Tell us what you think about religion in public schools. You can comment at voaspecialenglish.com. You can also find transcripts and MP3s of our reports. And you can find us on Facebook at VOA Learning English.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report. Street children in Ethiopia say their biggest need is shelter. But a study shows that local non-governmental organizations and community groups rarely offer what the street children want. The international aid group Save the Children did the study. One of the researchers says the limited services provided by local NGOs do not match what the children see as their greatest needs. Save the Children talked with children living on the streets in 5 major cities, 3 regional towns, and 8 rural villages. The children discussed many subjects, including their needs, their health, and the risks they face. There are about 30,000 street children in Ethiopia. About 17,000 of them live in the capital, Addis Ababa. More than half of the children do not have access to shelter or enough food. They survive mostly on what they receive from shining shoes, selling small items to passers-by, and appealing to strangers for help. The street children face health threats. Research shows that about 30% are seriously sick, but most do not have any kind of treatment available. About 40% of the children may have been forced to have sex. The children believe that having shelter will reduce these kinds of risks. The child assistance group Goal Ethiopia used to provide shelter for street children, but it found that this discouraged the children from re-entering their own communities. The Ethiopian government is finishing work on a national social protection strategy. It will include new ways of providing support to families to reduce poverty and keep children off the streets. For VOA Learning English, I'm Mario Ritter.
This is the VOA Special English Education Report. Recently, we told you about a finding that more years of school could help students get higher scores on intelligence tests. That was the finding of a study of teenage males in Norway. Now, other research shows that physical activity may help students do better in their classes. The research comes as educators in some countries are reducing time for activities like physical education. They are using the time instead for academic subjects like math and reading. Researchers at VU University Medical Center in Amsterdam reviewed the results of 14 studies. 12 were from the United States, 1 from Canada, and 1 from South Africa. The studies appeared between 1997 and 2009. They included more than 55,000 children, ages 6 to 18. Researcher Amika Singh says the studies showed a link between physical activity and scores on subjects such as math, English, and reading. Based on the results of our study, we can conclude that being physically active is beneficial for academic performance. Ms. Singh offers some possible explanations. There are, first, physiological explanations, like more blood flow, and so more oxygen to the brain. Being physically active means there are more hormones produced, like endorphins. And endorphins make your stress level lower and your mood improved, which means you also perform better. Also, students involved in organized sports learn rules and how to follow them. This could improve their classroom behavior and help them keep their mind on their work. The study leaves some questions unanswered, however. Ms. Singh says it is not possible to say whether the amount or kind of activity affected the level of academic improvement. This is because of differences among the studies. Also, they were mostly observational studies. An observational study is where researchers do not do controlled comparisons. They only describe what they observe. So they might observe that physically active students are more likely to do better in school. But that link does not necessarily mean being active was the cause of those higher grades. The researchers called for more high-quality studies to confirm their findings. They said they found only 2 high-quality studies. They also pointed out that outcomes for other parts of the world may be quite different. The findings appeared in the archives of pediatric and adolescent medicine. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Presutti.
I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Education Report. Surveys of American teenagers find that about half of them do not get enough sleep on school nights. They get an average of 60 to 90 minutes less than experts say they need. One reason for this deficit is biology. Experts say teens are biologically programmed to go to sleep later and wake up later than other age groups. Yet many schools start classes as early as 7 in the morning. As a result, many students go to class feeling like 16-year-old Danny. He plays 2 sports, lacrosse and football. He is an active teen, except in the morning. He says getting up in the morning is pretty terrible. He is very tired. Through first and second period of school, he can barely stay awake. Michael Bruce is a clinical psychologist with a specialty in sleep disorders. He says teenagers need to sleep 8 to 9 hours or even 9 to 10 hours a night. He says sleepy teens can experience a form of depression that could have big effects on their general well-being. It can affect not just their ability in the classroom, but also playing sports and driving a car. Michael Bruce says any tired driver is dangerous, but especially a teenager with a lack of experience. So what can schools do about sleepy students? The psychologist says one thing they can do is start classes later in the morning. He points to studies showing that students can improve by a full letter grade in their first and second period classes. Eric Peterson is the head of St. George's School in the state of Rhode Island. He wanted to see if a 30-minute delay would make a difference. It did. He says visits to the health center by tired students decreased by half. Late arrivals to first period fell by a third. And students reported that they were less sleepy during the day. Eric Peterson knows that changing start times is easier at a small private boarding school like his. But he is hopeful that other schools will find a way. Patricia Moss, an assistant dean at St. George's School, says students were not the only ones reporting better results. She says just about all the teachers noticed immediately much more alertness in class and a more positive mood. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. You can read, listen, and comment on our programs at voaspecialenglish.com. We're also on Facebook and Twitter at VOA Learning English.
This is the VOA Special English Education Report. Spain is struggling with a recession. More than 1 in 5 Spaniards are out of work. The unemployment rate is the highest of the 17 nations that use the euro. But one area of the economy that seems to be doing well is English classes. A report this year from the EF Education First Company listed Spain as a low proficiency country in English. Spain ranked just below Italy and just above Taiwan. About a fifth of the world speaks Spanish. There are many Spanish-language TV shows and movies. Spaniards can also watch Hollywood movies dubbed in Spanish or news from Latin America. One of the few English voices on Spanish TV belongs to Richard Vaughn. Mr. Vaughn is from Texas, but for 35 years has lived in Spain. He operates that country's biggest English teaching company. It even has its own TV channel. Aprende Inglés, Learn English, is Spain's only national channel in English. He says people watch his channel and take his classes to get a better job. People don't learn English here for cultural reasons. Some do. But the motive is always, 99% of the time, professional. Modern changes in the world economy, globalization, may offer chances for a better job in another country. But economic problems at home can also make people feel they have few other choices. The director of the Language Center at the London School of Economics says language learning is up across Europe. In Spain, some of those studying English hope for jobs in Britain or the United States. But others want to work for international companies with offices in Spain. Many companies now require workers to be bilingual. Dominic Campbell is an American who lives in Madrid and teaches English part-time. He says a lot of jobs now want at least Spanish and English, and a lot of them are asking for Spanish, English, and French, especially airlines. He says many of his students thought, I've got Spanish. That's all I need. But people also need jobs. More than 40% of Spaniards in their 20s are out of work. Inigo Gomez has an education degree but could not find a teaching job. So I think it's a good idea to go to the United Kingdom and try to find a job as a Spanish teacher. And while he does that, many Spaniards, for the first time, will be spreading their new education in English at home. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Presutti. You can learn English and get the latest news every day at voaspecialenglish.com.
This is the VOA Special English Education Report. A 3-year effort in developing countries will seek to put 25 million children in school for the first time. Another goal of the Global Partnership for Education is to train 600,000 teachers. The partnership recently awarded nearly $170 million in grants to 7 countries. These were the first grants since the organization changed its name a few months ago from the Fast Track Initiative. Fast Track was founded in 2002. Charles Tapp is an advisor to the partnership. He says, there had been a lot of evolution of the old Fast Track Initiative, which was essentially something of a donors club, I think. And what was clear from our perspective was that we were not just a funding entity. This was indeed a partnership. The partnership includes almost 50 developing countries, as well as donors, civil society groups, and teacher organizations. It also includes private companies, international development banks, and United Nations agencies. The latest grants were awarded to Afghanistan, Ivory Coast, Guinea-Bissau, Mali, Moldova, Mongolia, and Timor-Leste. Mr. Tapp says the grant to Afghanistan is worth almost $56 million. He says the Afghan government has made a very strong commitment of allocating as much of its own resources as it can for education. Historically, Afghanistan has had some very, very well-educated people. They tend to come from sort of the urban centers. But obviously, given the recent troubles and problems in Afghanistan over the last 20 years or so, the quality of education has plummeted. Mr. Tapp says Ivory Coast received $41 million to help in its recovery from the recent political violence there. One goal is to get school feeding programs in place. Mr. Tapp says more countries are now looking for help from the partnership. Unfortunately, given the current global financial climate and the fact that there are still 67 million kids out of school around the world, demand for our financing seems to be increasing rather than decreasing. But many donor countries are reducing their spending. So, he says the partnership must show them that their money is being well spent. He says it's very clear that in the global partnership partner countries that you're seeing more kids getting to school for longer and for a better education. And as education improves, he says, so does the health of a country. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report. UNICEF, the United Nations Children's Fund, has reported some good news about education in two areas of Somalia. Puntland and Somaliland are now relatively peaceful and secure, at least compared to central and southern Somalia. A study found that in Puntland, the share of students in primary education increased from 26% to 43% over the last 5 years. A smaller increase was reported in Somaliland. In both cases, the gains in school attendance were greater among boys than among girls. Girls leaving school is a problem across Somalia. For example, only 1/3 of Somali girls who had completed first grade took the Form 4 exam in the 2011-2012 school year. And girls represent only 28% of students in Somali secondary schools. The communications chief for UNICEF in Somalia, Susanna Price, says more schools are being built. She says the agency is developing projects in several fields of education. She also says UNICEF has been working on training teachers and developing non-traditional forms of education. Some of these programs are for children of families that herd livestock and move from place to place. Susanna Price says education is very important to the future of Somalia. But there are problems in getting parents to send girls to school. The spokeswoman says UNICEF encourages equality between males and females in education. More universal education could help Puntland and Somaliland also improve other areas of development, such as health care. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman.